Welcome everyone to our Apex 30-minute Thursday. Today's topic is FSM, Finance and Supply Management Close Management, presented by Greg Patterson. My name is Ann Wehrheim. And let's go ahead and get started. For today's agenda, I'm going to just give you a quick overview on who we are here at Apex, introduce today's presenter, and then Greg will be telling you all about close management and how to get started with close management, and then give you a quick summary at the end. So that's our agenda for this morning, for today. Next, please. Thank you. Just a bit about Apex. We're a division of ASGN, serving 300 of the Fortune 500, in all major industries. Our solutions are highly scalable and deliverable nationally, with over 180 unique IT skill sets in over 70 branch locations across the US, Europe, Mexico, and India. Specifically, our Infor practice has experience in more than just healthcare to service many of our Infor clients, as well as those using Epic, Cerner, and Kronos. As the second largest IT staffing and service provider, we can fill just about any role. Next, please. Most of all, our Infor practice works with clients beyond the cloud, offering the right services at the right time. Before the project, our advisory services guide the client through the selection process and assesses organizational readiness through BPA and process design. We offer total program governance and change management services to start clients off on the right foot for their implementation. During the project, we offer prescriptive guidance to reduce risk, duration, and cost. And after the project, managed services helps clients to sustain their investment through on-demand service, staff augmentation, and incident support to be your partner before, during, and after the project. Today's presenter, as I said, is Greg Patterson, and I'll let him take it over from here. Thank you very much, Greg.
Thank you, Ann, and good afternoon, everyone. As Ann said, my name is Greg Patterson, and I am a solutions consultant here at Apex in the Infor practice. I have quite a bit of experience working with a wide variety of our clients on their Infor implementations, optimizations, migrations, and other sort of work. Today, we're going to talk about FSM Close Management, which is a not well known or used maybe, but very powerful feature inside of the FSM suite. I'm going to start us off by walking us through a few slides that explain to you exactly what the close management solution in FSM is and what it can do, some of the use cases. And then we're going to walk through some of the ways you can set up and apply it in your organization with the mock close cycle. But keep in mind, even though it's called close management, as you'll see here as we talk about some of the features, it can be used for a wide variety of task challenges inside of your enterprise. So to start us off, close management is an integrated task-based system in FSM, and it is essentially a tracker of milestone actions that your team needs to complete in a process that you design. It has the features to allow you to identify and track issues related to processes that you've created. You also get to capture metrics, which we'll look at about task completion. And it also helps you flow information between all of the team members inside of FSM and maintain an audit trail. Its use is quite a multifaceted piece. It's typically associated with the financial close cycle. So in our example today, I'm going to walk you through using it to complete a fiscal close process, but it has a wide variety of additional use cases inside of your enterprise related to different departments in the enterprise. So for example, if you have actions that must be completed once a contract is completed in maybe your sales CRM system, and that contract might integrate into FSM in some ways, but there's specific tasks that users have to perform in order to get that set up as either a project, right, or some other thing. Those tasks can be added to this close management process so that they generate for the right team members to be able to complete that process. This also works if you have account creation processes that you have to do inside of other systems. If you have a weekly action you have to do maybe with your bank or with another external entity. If you have a certain client onboarding, or if you have certain review processes or quality assurance processes inside of the financial enterprise, right? All of this can be applied to the use of close management because it's simply generating tasks and prompting users as you've told it, right? It is not necessarily specific to a financial process. It can be used for a wide variety of different ones. Why you would use close management can vary. It does have the ability to schedule and monitor multiple processes across an organization. So if you have trouble knowing where you are during close, or you would like a more electronic and automated way of knowing where you are during your close processes or any of the process examples I mentioned earlier, this would give you that ability to see it without purchasing maybe another task-based tool or another web-based task tool that you have to go through your IT team. You can specify whether the tasks perform on a monthly, quarter, or annually basis. You also have the ability to create one-time tasks which is another way to handle certain one-time activities that occur infrequently. You can assign tasks to a team or an individual, which allows you to deal with some of those things that come up that might need to be performed that could be done by more than one person. If you decide to use close management, you can track the start, end, and due date, so you can understand how long it takes people maybe to complete a task if you're trying to work on the speed or the time at which you complete a close process. You can see from a dashboard, which we'll look at here in a little bit, the status of all tasks and make actions necessary to void or complete tasks. You also have the ability to attach supporting documentation and to include steps in the task that you generate. And that's where some of the power of the solution comes, that it can not only be a method for tracking activity, but it can be also prescriptive in the activity that it has and is defined. You also get to analyze and measure the performance of people completing these tasks, or perhaps reassigning them, or other issues, all of course within the FSM platform. Close management works once you set it up and create a process off of a quite simple loop that governs most everything. The roles of close administrator and close manager are key in the ability to set up and manage the close process. And then for those people who will be performing the work or the actions or completing the task, the role of close resource is available to allow them to complete a task. But close management flows through this workflow that's displayed for you in a somewhat simple fashion. You define your close management process, you schedule it depending on your frequency, and then you open the process for work, right? These are actions to be formed by an administrator or a manager, someone who governs the overall process. Those tasks are generated in schedules, and then those users complete their task. You can define when you're creating a close management process if a task requires approval. You have the ability to choose that option at a task level or a sub-process level, which we'll talk about here in a second. If it doesn't require approval, then the task is done and everything's good. If it does, you generate an approval process for what could be another user or team. That user would approve or reject. If it's approved, the activity is complete, the task is completed. If it's rejected, it goes back to in progress to the person who tried to complete it first, right? A very simple IPA workflow that's used by the application in order to keep your task flowing in the enterprise. But all this is going to be based on the close management process you create, which we're going to walk through here in some of our setup steps. So as the title of today's session is, right, getting started with close management, some of the prerequisites that you need to consider about close management is to first make sure the close management is available in your version of Cloud Suite, depending on which one you have. It may or may not be provisioned in your system. If that is something you don't see or are unable to find, that is something you would want to reach out to your Infor account or support rep team to talk about. After you confirm you have the close management application available in your flavor of Cloud Suite, you want to then make sure you grant the close administrator, manager, and resource roles, at least to the starting setup team if it's going to be one or more users. Those roles sometimes are not used or granted, or you might have been on the solution for a while and maybe just had never had an understanding or a use for them, it typically is something that is going to require your security team at least to get involved at first, because most of the close management functionality is truly contained within close management and you don't necessarily see in other parts of the application. So getting the security set up is very key. You will need your IT team to make sure all the users involved in the close process and completing tasks have a correct access granted, right? That's the close resource role. And they have an actor context. And we'll talk about user setup and task generation in a moment about why that's important. You'll want to also make sure that your financial team's close calendar is pre-built in some other format for you to reference. This kind of is a little bit of a best practice. We don't really suggest that you attempt to build a close management process if you haven't sat and thought out or written out or documented at least the steps and milestones in your existing close process in some offline form. You'll need that information handy to reference as you're creating the task. Also, if you decide to use this for a fiscal close process, right, there's an ability to create the task and the process for your close using Infor Spreadsheet Designer. So we definitely suggest that you've taken the time to map out what your BD +1, right, 2, 3, 4, 5 day activities are. If they have any dependencies is another key thing to capture. And it even helps to know who on the team or what teams are responsible for that task. All that information you will find will be very helpful in setting up close management. It's something you want to make sure you gather together and prepare before you start your venture. And then you will need to make sure your IT team knows that you'll need the close management data cube scheduled to refresh. Again, if you have not already scheduled that cube, it may not be included in your refresh. And it provides a wide range of analytic capability for you to see activity in close management. One note that we have for close management administrators is to make sure that they grant themselves the close web app if you have enabled, or you should have by now enabled, the web app features in FSM. The close management web app, which is what we're going to use today to talk about our setup and our uses, is a very simple layout to be able to configure and set up close management. And you have a picture of it on your screen, but we're going to go directly into the application and take a look at it. It's really the easiest way I've found to set up close management. So while our application loads, we will come into our close application. If we've configured this at Apex in one of our demo environments, so it is a little behind on dates, but you will get the fundamental understanding. So one of the reasons why the refresh of that close management cube is key is what you see right now is the current period close process, which is under the close web app. You have the ability as a close manager as well to see a wide variety of this analytic information, but in both spots for this particular application, that cube is the driving force of being able to see this information. As I said earlier, and we'll talk about later, you have the ability to generate tasks by team and by day of close. So you see here, the system's kind of telling me by day of close how many tasks are outstanding based on the schedule I've already created. A very nice feature if you're in a large enterprise or you have a complex process and you need to track some of the things that are going on with your close process. As in any of the FSM application or any of the analytics, clicking that detail button lets me drill into that pie chart that I see. And then based on my day of close, I'm seeing the total task, the percent complete as reported by the person, a very nice feature as well. If you have your team use it to update, number of tasks open, number of tasks they're overdue. And if any of them were due today, I would see that as well. And again, this information is updated based on task completion and how often you trigger a refresh of those analytic cubes. Close management in the web app brings you to this primary place to see your current period process. It then gives you the ability to see overdue task, rejected one-time task, which is option, approvals assigned to you, or if they were assigned to another user, team approvals, which are approvals that are not assigned to one user, but maybe a group, messages in the close process. And we have some sent down here that you can see as well, which is a nice feature you can use to reduce the amount of email your team sends back and forth about close. You could contain these messages solely inside of the FSM application, or you're more than welcome, of course, to expand them. And then you have your to-dos, your team to-dos, future tasks, completed task, a calendar, and administration. We're going to come back, though, and look at some other features in the application here as well. So back to our slide deck. Let's talk about how you would get started using the closed management system. It does require some configuration, and its configuration, like many things in FSM, is built upon some of the existing features in the system, which we'll talk about. We've gathered three kind of core phases for you to follow in configuring the application. There's a lot more to it if you want some more nuanced features, of course, but this will get you kind of started in kind of understanding what's involved, and then from there you can determine some of the additional features that you might need or might need to layer into your implementation. We'll start first with the configure phase, then move to our define and schedule phase, and then your ongoing activity is complete and maintain. The last two phases are those that are contained inside of our existing process guide for the closed management system, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So in our first phase, to configure the application, you need to create a system calendar. You need to define a closed management group, configure an action reason, configure teams, approval codes, and task types. With the calendar, it is used already in the system in the cash management or bank reconciliation module as well. So you could reuse the existing system calendar already. You do not have to, though. You can always create a new one, but the calendar is used to control the generation of the task and the due dates. And so it's very key to make sure it's set up based on how you fiscally handle your close process and not maybe a calendar that you don't use if it was created a while ago. The closed management group is the highest level of control in the system, and it allows you to set many features. We'll look at that here in a second. Action reasons are used to reject, to start or void a task, or to close a task. It's kind of a way to group common actions and allow you to report on them without the user having to do so much typing. And then teams are used throughout the application to assign tasks. You can assign a task to a person or a team, but teams are still required inside of the solution. The approval codes are, of course, used in the approval process that we talked about earlier. And task types can help you view and group tasks and check their status during reporting. There are three task types: primary, secondary, and tertiary. And then you have the ability to define what those task types are. This is typically used for some of my larger customers who find it necessary to be able to report what's going on in different departments, right, or different divisions of the company. But let's take a look inside of FSM and we'll show you some of that setup. So I'm going to come back to our closed management web app we just talked about and click on administration here. And I would see the setup and process area. This is kind of why I said the closed management app is easy to access this. You can also, however, do this under closed administration, right? Just a little bit different of a navigation menu and layout. You can also, as a closed manager, get to some of these settings as well, but the closed manager is really designed to manage the closed process and tasks, not so much to administer or set up the application. But we'll go back to our closed web app since I'll be using that today. Back to administration, and we see our setup and process area. System calendars is accessible here, and here we're just using our existing bank calendar, but this calendar is already created normally in your system, normally for your banking application. It defines what a non-working and a working day is, so it's very pivotal to the setup of the closed management calendar. You can use an existing one, or you can create a new one. The closed management group, as I said earlier, is kind of the core defining group in closed management. And as I navigate to one we've already created, you see you'll be able to create a code and a description for that group, attach a calendar, and attach a default period group. Particularly if this closed management group is only going to be used maybe for fiscal tasks, right? You could attach it to a month or year. You have the ability to set reason code requirements for certain actions. You can allow or disallow one-time task and require approval. You can allow people to override resource restrictions, allow different closed resource options, trigger certain updates of your analytic cube, and if you decide you want to, you can have the system inform users of these tasks in FSM using external emails as well, which is controlled in this area. As I said, kind of the closed management group is kind of the highest level. It is a core setting in closed setup. So this particular area defines, I would say, most of your high level settings in closed management. From there, if I go back to my main web app administration page, I have the ability to set up action reasons, which are used in the closed management process to perform different actions. This, of course, is a shared business class with other action reasons from your cash ledger and approval flows in other parts of the application. So it is a common feature that you'll be able to set up as well. You also can configure different approval codes for different users as well. which are over here. You can control your task types as well in these two areas. Again, the approval code listing, right, is a common approval code listing, such as the other parts of the application. You'll need to create at least one unique approval code for close management. And then task types allow you to group different task types. We're using a single type here in the primary level, which is an accountant action that just lets us track that this is assigned to accountant. You have 3 tabs here for primary, secondary, and tertiary to create those under. You only are required to have a primary and a secondary, but this is a great feature to allow you to control a little bit of granularity in your reporting on different tasks, because it can help you see if a task is for the accounting team or maybe an auditing team or another group as well. Once you've gone through the process, as we go back to our slide of configuring, your next phase to get close management up and running is to define and schedule your task. And that requires you create a process and create a closed task in the system, schedule that process, and open a period for work. All of these fall in that first area that we kind of saw earlier when we were looking at our close management process, which is shown here for you. Creating that close management process requires you to define each of those tasks and, of course, define how frequently those tasks are going to be performed. And of course, the sub processes. Once it's all defined, you can use the calendar and the period you've defined to schedule those tasks. And since their frequency is normally recurring, that schedule process is kind of something you do regularly. And once you schedule it, you'll open a process for work. You can keep one process or more processes open at a time. The logic behind a closed process in the application is kind of a simple hierarchy, which isn't difficult to understand once you've kind of laid out and thought about your closed process. The process itself groups all of the tasks and sub-processes. The sub-processes below are used to arrange tasks, and then the tasks are children of those sub-processes. You also have the ability to link tasks to be interdependent, which we'll talk about in a future slide, right? But all of this hierarchy is used to create one or more processes in your system for a single group of tasks. So if we were to take this logic and apply it to a base close process, as we show on the screen here for month end, you would have a close payables sub-process, and then you would complete your accrual and then close your ledger as a task maybe. Same thing with the purchasing close and same thing with an inventory close. This simple hierarchy, right, gives rise to the flexibility of using the system so many different ways. And with creating this, you aren't limited to just creating it in the application. There are 3 different ways that you can create your close management process in the system. You can either do it manually using this define new process window, where you basically go in and define the process, enter the calendar, define your risk one by one. That's good for basic processes, but if you have a large or extensive close process, that'll take you some time. There's a wizard that allows you to piece together different elements of the process and build it inside the system. And that is the recommended method we use for creating your close process in the system, as it will guide you through that creation step in a little bit of a logical manner, right? And it's great for a first-time user. If you have a large or extensive close process that you want to add tasks to and sub-process to the system, you can always use Infor Spreadsheet Designer. Infor provides in the application a guide that shows you how to structure your ISD and a template, but it's a simple process, sub-process task hierarchy, as we kind of show in the screen below, right? With those elements together, you need to complete your define and schedule phase in order to kind of define and schedule and create all of the processes that you will use in the system. If I step over to my application and click back on administration and click on manage processes, we'll just take a quick look at one of our processes. Here I have an example month end close. If I hit the plus button here, you see I have some sub processes and I have some tasks, right? Using the similar layout and the similar terminology throughout the FSM application, anything that is detail is a task, and I can click on that to view that task and see the defined beginning and end details, right, for that task. If I've defined it by schedule or a month and day of the period, I can also enter the number of hours to complete when I'm creating that task, and then here's where I use my task types to allow me to report on the actions for that task. You can set an individual task and approval, the requirement to attach supporting documents. You can also require people to attach journal entry detail, a very nice feature for the fiscal close process. And then you can freeform type in your instructions here, or you can also use the attachment feature to attach either a link or a document to this task for users to reference when they complete it. All of this is controlled, of of course, inside of that task detail screen that we set here. And then you have the ability to set processing rules, schedule rules, and define your owner for each individual task. But as we stated earlier, going back to our area, all this is controlled under managed processes under administration. And a lot of this requires that you've taken the time to kind of think out how you want your different task elements to appear in your process. The easiest way, as I said earlier, is having these tasks laid out by your BD1, BD2, BD3 dates in a sequence or a hierarchy that keeps some of those dependencies. That'll make it the easiest for you to be able to set this up. We'll go back to our slide. After you create your task, you'll schedule and open them for a work period, and that's a fairly simple process in the application, and the two parts of the screen kind of walk you through that fairly quickly. Once you've set up, you need to complete and maintain your task. And in the complete and maintain process, you start your tasks. Tasks are either maintained by being changed, modified, edited, which we'll talk in a second. You can use messages about tasks between users. You can complete them, and you can approve a task as well. You can maintain tasks in FSM once they're generated by reassigning, renaming, moving, copying, linking, or avoiding them. Linking tasks creates interdependencies, and you can define that link when you create your process, as we talked earlier. If you find later that a link exists between two tasks, this link option allows you to do that once the task is generated as well. But that interdependency can become very useful if you, again, have a complex process you're creating. And then void allows you to avoid tasks that won't be completed either because they don't need to be or the process doesn't require them in this particular instance. The complete and maintain phase is where the tasks are completed by the resource. And as I've talked about earlier, this is kind of the part that most of the action lives in. The ability to attach, require attachments and generate, require attachments and generate approvals is all controlled kind of in this sub process. And that's really where most of the steps that you will see as a closed resource are used, right? Closed resources spend most of their time in this area of the application. In this process of the application, and it is this simple. They would complete the tasks that are assigned to them in their inbox, or they would make changes to tasks that they no longer need to complete. If we look over into the FSM application to see what a closed resource sees, I could click on My Work if I'm under the closed application, or I could click on Closed Resource to see, right, the My Work application. It's kind of the same look, but there are tabs here that group the tasks that user's assigned, either those that are overdue, rejected, approval, team approvals, messages, future tasks, etc. The user can then come in and double click on the task, highlight the task and click view to see the detail of the task, right? This particular one is related to a journal entry. So this one's asking for journal entry details to be attached to it. The different settings you set earlier about your task and your process groups help determine this information, but all of this is what a user would see when they're completing their task. And then once they are done, they simply highlight the task that they need to complete and then click the complete button in order to log their completion action, which asks them for their effort and any other attachments. So we kind of high level brought you through 3 core phases in implementing close management, as you see on the screen before. Again, the define and schedule and complete and maintain phases are ones you will continuously use to define and schedule new processes or to schedule processes you've already created. In summary, we also want to note that there's some advanced features you can use in close management. One-time tasks can be used, and we didn't really talk about those, but they exist to create during the close period, and users can create them and assign them themselves or others. You can extend task management using Infor process automation about rejections or approval to change different process flow or satisfies different process flow needs that you have. And then we can also allow closed management resources to update the completed date and the level of effort for a task that might be running late so that you can later report on how much time it actually takes to complete a task you scheduled. And there is also an issue management solution within the closed management application that allows you to track close issues as well. With all of this, we do give you some best practices at the end of all of our 30-minute Thursdays generally, and we try and recommend to you kind of the best way to approach this. We suggest that you perform a task generation of your tasks to a single user before you roll this out. You definitely don't want to just generate all of your tasks and use this before, of course, doing some tests to make sure you've configured everything the way you expect it. Make sure you identify and train your close managers before rolling out the system. Having multiple people understand how the close management process works and how you've configured it helps with adoption. You definitely want to start small and expand slowly. So this gets back to the use case. If you want to start by using a specific step for account creation, department creation, or other specific process you do maybe weekly, right, that you can use Close Manager for and then expand out from there. And of course, you want to make sure that you complete a dry run. Make sure you've captured all the tasks that you need to so that your employees don't end up drowning in all of the changes that might happen in adopting the Close Management application. We also do suggest you use the application to store links and guides for close reference, particularly your fiscal close process, storing your steps, scripts, documentation, or other things in those closed tasks for reference purposes. Kind of starts to make your FSM system a one-stop shop for many of the things your finance team is using. And of course, if you need help with this or have more questions, you can always reach out to Apex for guidance or help with a targeted deployment effort. With that, we'll see is any questions from our audience today.